Hello everyone, welcome back to On the Ledger. This is your host Mol Said. Hope you're all doing well as we're back once again on your weekly rendezvous from Paris. Today we'll be talking about an exciting integration, one that I've personally been looking forward to for a while. As you probably know, Ledger Live, the companion app of your Ledger device, has evolved a lot in the past couple of years. It's gone from being a simple interface to manage your digital assets to a hub where you can access a wide variety of crypto services and apps. But one thing was missing. When sending digital assets in Ethereum, there was no way to use Ethereum Naming Services, mostly known by ENS. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, ENS is a decentralized naming service that replaces long, complicated blockchain addresses with easy-to-remember names, making transactions faster, simpler, and most importantly, more user-friendly. In addition to that, ENS is also a DAO, and it has its own token, which was airdropped to early adopters and is also available on Ledger Live. So, in a world where your wallet becomes an essential pillar of your on-chain identity, ENS is more than just an address, it's a social identifier. And the market has caught up with the idea, with some ENS names selling for astonishing valuations in recent years. So what's that all about? How will ENS evolve in the future? And what can you do with it on Ledger Live? Join us as we explore these questions and more. We're glad to have Alicia.eth on the show. Alicia is the governance lead at ENS. We'll be joined by podcast regular Fabrice Dautria, Ledger's head of platform. Alicia, Fabrice, pleasure to have you on the show. How are you feeling today?
Thanks so much. Feeling really great and excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise, Mo. Super happy to be here. I'm sure we'll have a great chat today.
Absolutely. So let's start by setting the table. Alicia, tell us the story of ENS. When was it born and how does it work?
Yeah, so we are coming up to the 6th birthday of ENS, the protocol. And so it was founded by Nick Johnson, who is Nick.eth, and he was at the Ethereum Foundation working on the Swarm project, which is similar to like IPFS, and essentially started ENS as a side project. And it got to the point where he received a grant from the Ethereum Foundation to spin this side project into like a full-time gig. And that funding allowed him to onboard some more team members and commit to working on it full-time. And, you know, luckily and when I say we, so True Names Limited was the company that Nick started, and now it's called ENS Labs. And we have been funded by grants for the last couple of years, up until last year when the DAO started to fund ENS Labs. And so, yeah, it started as a side project, spun out of the EF, and now, you know, in the last, I would say 2 years in particular, the rate of adoption for ENS has really been incredible. I think, you know, thinking about this idea of, I don't know if it was like NFT summer or JPEG summer last year, I think that ENS was really at the heart of that. And I think this speaks to the fact that naming is central to a lot of what we do and how we interact in the spaces that we're in.
So it's interesting because most people might not know that, but ENS is an NFT. So you're basically buying an NFT that enables you to basically name your address in a certain way, in whichever way you see fit. And then whoever wants to be sending you assets would then use that name that you've chosen in order to either send you ETH, any token, or, you know, basically an NFT. So, you know, there's like a kind of a transition between like the .com and kind of .eth. And I know that that's a narrative that has been pretty predominant in the past couple of years, especially with like the, you know, NFT summer or NFT year that we've had in between 2021 and 2022. How are you actually like perceiving that shift? And you know, for someone who's just like kind of discovering the space, what can you tell them about the different things that they can do with their ENS?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to talk about is this idea that normally when you have a new technology, the kind of things that really excite people are this idea of replacing the old technology completely. ENS doesn't do that, and that's actually a distinction from other naming services in the blockchain space. So ENS is compatible with DNS names. So if I have alicia.xyz, it is also can be imported into ENS and become an ENS name. And so ENS is forward compatible with DNS. And I think that makes sense from the perspective of ENS being a critical piece of infrastructure, not only for Ethereum, but the entire internet. It doesn't make sense when every single website that you go on, right? Well, the majority of the websites that you visit are DNS domains. And so that as a starting point was a really important aspect of ENS. And so now there is this idea that an ENS domain is a domain just like you have in Web 2. You can host a decentralized website with it. Like you said, it's really great to make Ethereum addresses human readable. So I don't know about you, but of the 42 characters in my Ethereum address, I remember 0x75. I couldn't for the life of me remember even like the next character, but I can remember Alicia.eth. And so this idea of having a human readable name for your crypto wallet, for your Ethereum address is really great. And then also we've started to see this idea of a Web3 username really develop over the last year or so. And I think, with evolutions, even in Web 2, of like log in with Facebook and being able to sign in with Google and things like that, you definitely feel the benefits of not having to create a username and password every single time you go to like a website and create an account. And I guess the difference between ENS and these kind of trusted third-party services that exist in Web 2 from these big platforms is that your ENS name is user-owned. So there is really no one else. Like, I am the owner of Alicia.eth. When I log into anything, if I want to leave that service or leave that DAT, I just literally disconnect my wallet. I don't even have to go back there. I don't have to ask for anyone's permission to take my name somewhere else. I think this idea of like a self-sovereign identity, we're just kind of starting to hit like a tipping point with sign in with Ethereum. And we literally just had a Shopify integration a couple of weeks ago with sign in with Ethereum. So you can kind of start to see that it makes a lot of sense as we're talking about not only Ethereum, but the internet, to have a username that works across all platforms.
Absolutely, and we'll get into self-sovereign identities in a few minutes. But before that, how do you get an ENS, and how much does it cost?
Yeah, so there are basically two ways that you can get an ENS name, and so you can go and register it essentially using an interface, which is like a website that interacts with the smart contracts. And so ens.domains is a website that is created by ENS Labs, who are the main kind of developers of the protocol. And so you can just go to like app.ens.domains, register a name. Basically, you search it, and if it's available, you'll be able to register it. If it's not, it'll say that it's already been registered. It'll show you details like when it's expiring. I know a lot of people have like a really long list of names that they're interested in. And you can also register from the secondary market, so people who have already registered names are able to sell their names, because like you said earlier, an ENS name is an NFT, and so it can be traded and sold just like any other NFT. So, you can go to platforms like OpenSea, ENS Vision, LooksRare, and you can kind of buy a name in that way. And then, did you ask how much it costs as well?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically the cost of an ENS name, so ENS names can be either DNS names or .eth names. So for .eth names, there's basically 3 tiers of pricing. So a 5-character name is $5 US per year, and a 4-character name is $160 US per year, and a 3-character name is $640 per year. And the logic behind the pricing is just that 3 and 4-character names have more scarcity, because there's definitely like a finite number of them, and they're kind of deemed more desirable. And so the idea is that we want people to not register these names just because they were early and, they were here so they can, but we want people ultimately to register names because they want to use them. And this pricing model is meant to effectively disincentivize kind of squatting on a name and incentivize use.
Pretty interesting. Fabrice, ENS will finally be available on Ledger Live. This was a long time coming. What does that mean for Ledger users?
So first, we could have done it way faster, but it was very important for us to have an end-to-end experience where you have ENS, of course, on the Ledger Live UI, but also on the Ledger device screen itself. Doesn't make sense to type alicia.eth on your UI and verify 0x ABC whatever than on your device. It's even more confusing this way. So that's why it took so long. And we can deep dive into the details later if you're interested, Mo. Now, what does it mean? Well, you have two cases. The first case is I want to use still an hexadecimal address like I used to. I copy paste the address from another source. In that case, what Ledger Live will do, it will check if for this given hexadecimal address there is an associated ENS to it. And if that's the case, we will inform the user that yes, there is one. So that's already kind of useful because in the event I use Alicia address, it will tell me, Ledger Live will tell me, by the way, this is alicia.eth. So it's already kind of cool because now you know that you're probably sending to the right recipient. But the real added value is what happens if I directly decide to type alicia.eth because I don't want to bother with hexadecimal address anymore. When in that case, Ledger Live will check that the alicia.eth ENS is actually a valid one. And if so, we'll tell you, by the way, the hexadecimal address is, just in case you want to double check it. But you don't need to, because after that, you will continue your flow. You will see your transaction summary. Will tell you, be careful, you decided to select alicia.eth. This is what you will actually verify on your device. And so unless you really want to double check and also display the hexadecimal address associated to it, we will basically hide the hexadecimal address from your device display. And therefore, you will not bother anymore with hexadecimal character. You will just see I'm sending 0.1 ETH to alicia.eth for this amount of fees. And that's actually really, way more user-friendly than the actual transaction flow that we have today.
And you mentioned the key point about that verification process and the trusted display. And for those of you who are listening to us and don't know, the actual trusted display of the Ledger device is connected to the secure element, which is the chip that secures your private keys. So whatever you see on that trusted display is basically unhackable to a certain extent. So you being able to verify the ENS on the display gives you a guarantee that you're actually sending an address to that ENS name. One thing that, since people can't really hack into your device, they try to get you to commit a mistake. And one main mistake that people were committing, mainly due to the UX not being at the level at which it should be, is falling for address poisoning scams. So Fabrice, could you maybe explain what address poisoning is and how that ENS integration could help mitigate the risks associated with address poisoning?
Address poisoning in general is kind of a complex topic, so I'll try to be very short. But in a nutshell, what it means is somehow someone will make some either real or fake transaction appear in your transaction history. And they very much look like a valid transaction in the sense that the funds are either sent to or from an address that looks like completely legit. And most of the time, and that's what people are doing, they're selecting an address that is either exactly yours or even one that looks very much like yours, and there is just one character or two that are different. It's actually not so hard for a hacker to, in a couple of seconds, to generate an address where the first few and last characters are actually the same, but the characters in between are completely different. It's not super difficult to do. But so the hacker would have control of this address. And because you're lazy, you just go to your transaction history and you say, yeah, you know what, I don't know where my address is. I don't want to bother verifying it on my device and everything. So I just copy paste it from my transaction history. And that's when the mistake happens, okay? Because you're copy pasting an address that is actually not yours. That someone somehow made appear in your transaction history by poisoning your address. That's where the word comes from. I would say it's harder to do if your address is linked to an ENS somehow. Because at this moment, in your transaction history, you would see fabrice.eth. If you're receiving funds from, I don't know, I'm sending from Binance to my Nano, and my Nano is linked to fabrice.eth, I know I'm sending to fabrice.eth. It's still possible to create a fake ENS like fabros.eth. But in that case, to me at least, it's easier to spot the mistake by just seeing that it's a different letter than spotting the few different characters in 42 characters long string. So it could help, but let's be very honest. There is no perfect solution, and at the end of the day, you're still in complete control. So whatever you do when you're sending funds to someone, just double check it on your device. Whether it's an hexadecimal address, be very careful that you actually verify the address with the trusted source that give it to you. So if my friend is sending me an address on WhatsApp, that's where I check, the address he sent me. And I confirm it on my Ledger secure display. And character by character. It's painful, but that's the only way to be secure. Having ENS makes it easier to verify. But still, doesn't mean that you should skip this part. You should still verify it very carefully because, if one character is different, well, the recipient is not the right one. And so honestly, the mistake can be sometimes even easier to make because you read fast and you think it's okay. Just be careful. It's not because it's an ENS that you should go too fast.
Don't trust, verify. That's
Always.
what we always say. So, Alicia, we've spoken about this a little, but in a world where your wallet is actually an essential part of your on-chain identity or your identity in a more general sense, what do you think is the role of ENS in that, and how do you see it evolving? We've spoken about the fact that, a lot of people were actually buying ENS names that had some sort of a social identification. So we had the 3 digits, like with the like the 123 or 321 and all of that, and it actually like kind of created a social signal, but also a community of people that had those 3-digit ENSs that created some discords and started like doing things together. It became like some sort of a tool for mass collaboration between individuals that had that common identity. So what's your point of view about, all of that and how that, the ENS names being like a part of the evolution towards digital and on-chain identities?
Yeah, the way that I think about ENS evolving is, I would say the analogy is that it's like a passport, like we have in the physical world. So you can think of ENS as your passport on the internet. And on top of this kind of very functional layer of just like this ENS name relates to this Ethereum address, I think what you were talking about with, what became the 10K club within ENS is this sense of this layer of kind of belonging that is kind of put on top of the functional aspects of ENS names, which is a really exciting thing because I don't know that there has ever been, a piece of infrastructure that is so kind of open and extensible. It's open source, it's a public good, kind of anyone can do what they want with ENS, to develop it or extend it in a way that works for them. And I think the really exciting thing is thinking about, so at the moment we think about, your identity, it's like this singular thing, right? I am Alicia.eth. At the moment, and, when I go around the Web3 web, this is my single identity. I'm like this everywhere, but it's not the only part of me. I am like a DAO participant. I am a project contributor to other projects. I might be a podcast listener to a specific podcast. I might, there are all these different elements. And I think it's kind of interesting thinking about the potential for, I guess, like your primary ENS to be your passport, but then these like different ENS subdomains related to different aspects where you belong in different communities to almost become like stamps, right, in your passport, or almost like visas where you're like, wait, I'm going into this Friends with Benefits app. I might have a subdomain, it's something that they could do because it's a gated community. They could issue subdomains to members and you have it and that's how it's used. I think also from not only a community standpoint, but like a company and organization standpoint, because of, the technology that we've rolled out in the last, I would say 12 months with kind of off-chain ENS resolution, companies like Coinbase were able to issue, I think there are about 2 million names in the last kind of 8 months, 2 million ENS names, which are basically cb.id. So I have futurealicia.cb.id, and I think this is also a big part of the future of ENS, which is that you won't even know that that's an ENS name, right? Because at the moment you see a .eth and you associate it with ENS. But the future of ENS is really meshed a lot with DNS and the existing domain name system. And I think that that's also just like a really exciting part of what this looks like. And I think to me, it's how I know that ENS is different to any other domain name kind of blockchain product. We're not trying to sell a product here. We're trying to build infrastructure. And there's just a fundamental difference between trying to enable, naming infrastructure for the web than just like selling domain names.
Interesting. So many different questions are kind of coming to mind here. But I think like the that whole transition from state-owned identity, like your passport, your driving license, which is basically like issued by the country in which you live in or the country that you're from, to platform-owned identities, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's basically owned by a platform, and you're building your identity and your account as you go. And now we have like self-sovereign identities, which is basically your wallet and everything that you have in it, and how you're able to actually identify a wallet. I think the question that I have is that when you think about like the state-owned identities and the platform-owned ones, they're kind of non-transferable. Whereas the self-sovereign identities for now, they're all based on certain assets that you could basically transfer from one wallet to another. ENS is an NFT. It's not a soul-bound token. So how do you basically see the evolution towards self-sovereign identity to guarantee, kind of the veracity and the ownership of these assets to form a kind of verifiable identity?
Yeah, I think there are some really interesting projects in the space that are starting to kind of tackle this. I'm not going to say problem, but I think it's more of an opportunity. And so one example is like Gitcoin Passport, where you can kind of verify different elements, both from Web 2 and Web 3, to kind of build up a score, which will then let you do specific actions. And so that's one example. I think the other example that people are really excited about is kind of the zero knowledge piece. So there are projects like Sysmo, which will allow you to verify, say, an off-chain credential, and then you can, say, go into an environment on the internet, and I can know that I have verified my passport and that I am a human person, and this is my citizenship, say, and I don't need to disclose that information to the person on the other side, say, who is verifying my identity. They just see that I have, the Sysmo badge, and they can trust that that was verified as part of that process. So I think, this also ties into the fact that an ENS name can store any kind of text record that you like. And so basically any key value pair can be entered. At the moment, when you register an ENS name, you see all the standard kind of profile data, maybe like your Twitter, a website, your location, all that sort of stuff. But that is really just the beginning. I think we haven't even scratched the surface of the potential of what it means to be able to enter anything into an ENS name. And actually one project that, I think has kind of utilized this really well is Snapshot, which is a voting platform, like a governance voting platform. And to create a snapshot space, you're required to set an ENS text record as your snapshot ID. And then based on that, Snapshot will create a snapshot space for you. And so, there are kind of more and more, I think, opportunities for projects and communities, companies to create meaningful, whatever is a meaningful record for them, and then for that to be used within that ecosystem. And it sounds crazy to think about now, but, most people might have like 1 to 5 records associated with their ENS name. There's no reason in the future that that number can't be astronomical. I might have 500 different records associated with my ENS name based on, every time I go to an in real life event, or every time I join this group chat. And I think that, we're just kind of starting to explore what that means, but the potential is just, really exciting.
No doubt about that. And Fabrice, speaking of identity, how do you see Ledger's role in the evolution towards self-sovereign identities? Ledger started as a device to secure, digital assets on the blockchain, mainly financial assets, and how the space has evolved in the last few years makes it so like these digital assets are so much more than just financial assets. Now we're talking about culture, we're talking about identity, we're talking about data ownership, a variety of different things. So you touched on stacks, but like what is the next step of the Ledger product evolution, and how does it like kind of pave the way towards self-sovereign identities?
So first, like Alicia was saying, we're just scratching the surface. I think you said, and it's probably true. There is a ton of more things that might happen with ENS and in general around self-sovereignty. Indeed, if you remember a few years ago, we were securing crypto coins, then tokens, then NFTs. Now we are getting to the last frontier, which is, yeah, your identity is probably the most important digital asset that you can have. So I don't think it changes at all the mission from Ledger. It just make it even more important. Now you have to secure something that is, value and money is cool. It's important to secure, obviously, but it's even more important to secure your digital self in any shape or form you think about it. So Fabrice.eth or the Fabrice on Web3 that I will have or own is super important to me. I don't want to lose it. And unfortunately or fortunately, there is no way at the moment on the blockchain to recover something that is stolen from me. So it's even more important that I can actually secure this part of my digital self. Now, what is the next step? So to me, Ledger Stacks is really just, one step further towards making things easier to use. I don't know exactly what the next steps are, but I think we can all imagine or guess how you could bring the digital self-ownership in everyday life by making it easier. The first thing you can think of, obviously, is using your mobile phone. Okay, you use your mobile phone and you do stuff with it all day long. You absolutely have no control of your data. You're using Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, or whatever, and you don't control anything that's going on in this space. Web3 is here to change this by giving you back control. The only problem is right now there is absolutely no way for your phone to be Web3 compatible in terms of security. It's not a device that is designed to be secure enough for Web3. So I would say the next frontier, the next big challenge is to actually make this happen. How? Well, I'll let the listener and viewers imagine and maybe give us feedback. We have, of course, a few ideas. I'm not sure I can express all of them here, Mo, but we are definitely working on some ideas. And I think that the next frontier is not right now. It's not next year. It will take a bit more time, but we are definitely actively working on it.
Yeah, and even if you think about the evolution towards stacks, like just having a bigger screen opens up so many different possibilities, right? So yeah, I mean, I think we're all looking forward to seeing like how hardware can facilitate the adoption of Web3, and obviously like having secure hardware, either combined with Web2 hardware that is easy to use, or secure hardware that basically becomes the entry point to the ecosystem, is definitely something that will basically help out a lot of people in terms of like having a more seamless user experience. So Alicia, back to ENS. We've spoken about the governance token. That kind of means that holders can participate in the decision making. And it was a huge event. I think it was towards the end of 2021 or maybe beginning of 2022, if I'm not mistaken, where the kind of OG holders got airdropped some ENS tokens, and I was amongst the lucky people that got the tokens. So what can you tell us about all of that, and how are you kind of working collaboratively with the community as a governance lead at ENS?
Yeah, so I will never forget that day. It was November 8th, 2021,
Yeah.
which is the day that we launched the ENS token. And so I guess it actually loops right back to the start of the story. So when Nick created ENS, it originally had a 7 keyholder multisig made up of people from, I guess, like notable and respected people within the Ethereum ecosystem. So Nick was actually just one of those key holders. And so even from, its very inception, the governance of ENS has always been decentralized to some extent, because even having, this group of 7 people is decentralized compared to just, say, ENS Labs making decisions as the development company, maintaining and developing the protocol. So the way that we looked at it is that ENS was always on a path to become decentralized. And in 2021, we kind of realized that the DAO space had matured enough that it felt, I guess, like safe. And I use the term safe, following the DAO hack and all that sort of stuff that happened. So it felt like the DAO space had matured enough to launch a token and for this to make sense for the ENS community. And so essentially, token holders are able to delegate their ENS tokens to either themselves or any Ethereum address. And once you have delegated voting power, you're able to participate in voting on proposals which are put to the DAO. And basically, there's 2 kind of functions of the DAO. The first is protocol governance, and that is to kind of pass protocol upgrades and things like that. There are certain elements of ENS that just can't be automated. Everything that can just be, written into a smart contract and left and locked has been done. But there are elements such as the pricing mechanism. At the moment it's $5 a year for a 5-character name. A proposal could be put to the DAO to change that amount to $3 a year or $10 a year. And we kind of don't know what the future of ENS will hold and things like that. So it seemed, like a good idea to make that decision one that the DAO could control. And then there are just contract upgrades. We recently just passed a proposal to upgrade a bunch of contracts in, the ENS cluster of contracts. And then the other aspect of DAO governance is basically allocating the treasury and managing the treasury. And so with ENS, there are registration fees. It's honestly just a very lucky byproduct of the fact that this registration mechanism happens to generate ETH for the ENS DAO. And again, all of that money, all of those funds go into the DAO treasury. They have never, say, gone to the ENS Labs team or anything like that. And then it's up to, again, the delegates to vote on how they should be distributed. So, last year, ENS Labs was approved in a proposal to receive a daily stream of funding. And there are also working groups. So we have 3 working groups: meta governance, ENS ecosystem, and public goods, that also receive funding, say, twice a year. And then, we elect stewards, again, a decision by token holders who have delegated. And and actually it even goes right down from the really important kind of, I would say, 100-year vision type of stuff in terms of making decisions, right down to, decisions that happen monthly. So we have an ENS small grants program, and delegates can vote every month on ecosystem and public goods projects. So I guess just trying to really maximize the governance element and the governance power of those tokens, and use it as a pathway and a mechanism for the community to govern the protocol. I guess one thing to think about is when we did launch the DAO, so 25% of the airdrop went to the community of users. And so that's you, Mo, and myself. I was really excited. I think ENS was my first airdrop, kind of from participating in the space. And then, there are still 50% of the token in the treasury. And there was an allocation to contributors and developers and things like that. But I'm personally really, I guess, excited because the distribution in the ENS DAO is very, I would say fair. There's no kind of single delegate who holds, a lot of power or a majority of power. There are individuals, there are DAOs, there are companies all participating in governance. And I don't know, I think it's a really exciting expression of what a DAO is.
That's fascinating. I think all of these decentralized models of governance are really paving the way for a different kind of internet. I want to double click on something you said. You said 100 years vision. What's the 100 years vision then?
I mean, it's really hard for me to shake the scarcity mindset, given that ENS is a public good. And literally until we were funded by the DAO, there's always this feeling when you're kind of working on a public good that, is generally unable to capture value. And so, you live kind of grant to grant. And I know, say, in the 2018 bear market, it was, a really tough time for the team to kind of get through that. And now we're on the other side of it. But ultimately, the mission for ENS is that in order to be, a critical piece of infrastructure for the internet, we need to exist. And so the 100-year vision is, like, in the first instance, to exist. And I kind of think about it in this kind of model of surviving and then thriving. And so, to make sure that ENS does kind of continue to exist into, the next couple of decades and hopefully, the century. The DAO in January, say, just created this endowment where the idea is that no matter what happens with crypto markets, I mean, you know what it can be like. It really is from extreme to extreme. No matter what happens with ETH registration fees, ENS will be able to basically, throw off enough cash from its endowment to always be able to cover just like core developers. And basically just having initiatives like this and always being mindful of like, this is where we are today. But when it comes to, I guess ENS is ultimately, how they say, when you're planting a tree, it's so that others can enjoy the shade. I feel like ultimately there's this idea of stewardship. We're not building a company, we're building something for everyone, and it's not ours. It's, again, we're just the stewards. So, yeah, that's what I think of when I think of this 100-year vision. It's just that it's still something with decentralized governance, that's open source, that is all of these critical aspects that make it tougher to kind of reach that inflection point where you have like adoption, but also, that's what's so great about it, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's super inspiring. And, before we wrap up, Fabrice, I want you to tell us what's next for Ledger Live, and especially with ENS, that's something I've been thinking about. Like the evolution of Ledger Live was so fascinating to see in the past couple of years, like seeing, a platform going from being only about managing like crypto assets, and then you had these services like buy, sell, and stake. Now we have a ton of different D apps. Is there a world in which we can see ENS as one of the dApps and where people can register directly from Ledger Live?
I certainly hope so. We had this this change of mindset, like you said. We were doing everything internally. Now we are more and more relying on others to help us design the future Ledger product. And to do so, well, we invite everyone, including the ENS team, to join and create or add their dApp into, for instance, the Discover section. So that's one option, definitely. I think, by the way, that we are already discussing this thing between Nico and my team, and probably some members of Alicia's team. So it's probably something that will happen at some point. For the rest, well, it's the same strategy. We want to invite more teams to join. So right now we are very much focused on everything Ethereum virtual machine related. So every EVM network can become really easily integrated in Ledger Live. So we released the first batch a few weeks ago, I guess, and the Arbitrum and Optimism fans out there will probably be happy to know that it's coming out very soon. So and others, okay, it's not going to stop there. We have this scalable framework now to add more and more EVM networks on Ledger Live. Other type of framework as well are being designed. I will not say too much about this. And then we have the usual suspects. People are still asking for staking on Cardano and other stuff like this. So we are already working with some members of the Cardano team to make this happen. All of this to say, Still the same strategy, very different from what we did in the past, but now we are really working with everyone in the Web3 community in general. We'd love to remain super agnostic here, so everyone is welcome. And the only rule is, well, we have to build it together at some point. And usually what it means is the builders have a lot of work to do, and we're here to help and support and assist. But essentially now it comes from others. So it's pretty cool for us, to be honest, because now we're more and more discussing with people outside of Ledger and trying to create this relation with great teams out there. And the market is recovering, I think. So it's everything will be great in the near future. So expect more from Ledger Live fairly soon, and I hope the feedbacks will be interesting to read.
Very much looking forward to that. Alicia, you've spoken about the 100 years vision, but what's next for ENS in the short term?
So in the short term, we just released the name wrapper, which allows people to wrap their subdomains or to wrap their names and issue subdomains that are also NFTs. And so at the moment, or actually not at the moment, but say last month, I have a subdomain, which is say ens.alicia.eth, but that isn't its own NFT that can be traded and sold just like the parent .eth name. So now all of that is possible. Again, in terms of like that community perspective or organization perspective, whether it's like an NFT collection or an artist or a musician, I think this unlock with subdomains is really exciting because, there's just so much potential in terms of, I guess, like naming. There's like this element of naming that is kind of vanity, but then there's this element of naming which can be really functional. And I think, that we're going to get to this point where we're naming ENS subdomains just like we name documents on our computer, and as many as that as well. So I don't know, you don't want to go into my downloads folder, but I imagine that my ENS manager app, when I go into my profile, will look similar to that as well. So it's really exciting. Subdomains, we're working on gasless DNS integration so that people can bring over their DNS names, which traditionally you would just think of as a domain. And again, there's a pretty high threshold, even as kind of far along in the web as we are, there's still a high threshold for being able to have your own website on a domain. Obviously, it's easier with all the kind of third-party sites that are available. But this shift into people thinking about their DNS names as, Web3 usernames and things, and identity is really interesting because .eth is one namespace, within ENS. In the DNS system, there are thousands. And so it doesn't matter whether, you're a Bitcoiner or you're into Cardano or whatever it is. Like, you could get a .cash domain or a .name domain, and ultimately they can all be ENS names. So that's really exciting, removing that cost. And then I think L2s and kind of the scaling solution with records and subdomain issuing and things like that is also like another big kind of opportunity that we're really now digging into.
Lots of things going on your end. Very much looking forward to all of that. It's been a pleasure, Alicia, Fabrice. Thank you so much for sharing all of this very valuable information. And I hope that we can have you both on the show sometime soon to see everything that ENS and Ledger could have done together in the future. So looking forward to that.
Amazing. Thanks, Mo.
That's it. It's just awesome to see how Ledger Live is evolving and integrating with new technologies like ENS. It's not just making the experience better, but also showing how ENS is becoming a foundation for decentralized identities. Really exciting to think about all the possibilities this could open up. On the Ledger will be back soon with some of your favorite content. In the meantime, stay safe. Till next time, au revoir. This content is provided for informational purposes only and is the sole expression of our opinion and should not be relied upon as legal, business, investment, or tax advice. Do your own research. Any loss or profit is your sole responsibility. Stay safe.